Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our presentation today. My name is Angie Dorn. I'm the Sales and Marketing Administrator here at Innovia. Joining us for the presentation is Ramin Margi. He is one of our technical functional consultants. And we are going to be discussing workflow wizardry with BC and Power Automate. Say that 10 times fast, or even 5. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, and you can find that at the bottom of your Zoom panel screen, the Q&A box, and we will get those questions addressed. And this webinar is being recorded, so everyone will get a copy of the recording, and it will be shared on our website and on YouTube for continued reference. So I am going to turn it over to Ramin to begin our presentation.
Thank you so much, Angie. You can hear me okay? Yeah? Everything good?
Yes.
Excellent. I do apologize. I'm a little under the weather, so I might be a little bit slower than I normally am, but I do have to get through a lot of material pretty quickly. So um, don't be surprised if we go through the PowerPoint side pretty fast. All right, but ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's session going over workflow wizardry using Power Automate with Business Central. We'll go over some examples of how the magic powers of Power Automate can make you an automation wizard and transform your business process into something magical. One legal note, while today's session involves what some might call wizardry, Microsoft does not officially support spell casting, potion brewing, or summoning circles within Business Central or Power Automate. Strictly speaking, you know, the use of incantations and mystical powers is not part of your Microsoft licensing agreement. But with that, so as Angie mentioned, my name is Ramin Margi. I'll be your Sherpa today. I'm a senior technical functional consultant here on the support team here at Innovia. So feel free to shoot me a message to discuss anything you see in this presentation, or if you have any issues in general. That's what we're here for. Here's a quote that conveniently includes the magic theme of my presentation, which is only slightly overselling the awesomeness of automation, but basically, you know, Ms. Bell here mentions that one of the most interesting things about automation isn't on the practical side, but it's about creating magic and wonder and moments of splendor. And that's really true. When it works, it kind of instills a sense of awe in you, right? And that's the name of the game with Power Automate. But let's start with the basics. So what is Power Automate? Well, it's part of the Power Platform. And if you've been in the Microsoft ecosystem for a while, you should already kind of have heard of it at least. But the Power Platform is a low-code platform that spans, across multiple different services. The key, um, the key kind of pieces of the Power Platform that most people would be familiar with would be, Power BI, which is a cost-effective and powerful self-service BI and analytics solution. Power Apps, which is a tool you can use to create your own little standalone apps. It can be run on mobile or the web. Power Automate, which is what we're talking about today, which is the workflow engine, and Power Pages, which is a portal and website building tool. Now, the cool thing about what you're learning today with Power Automate is that it can dovetail with the other pieces in here too. So you could have automate flows work in conjunction with BI reports, with Power Apps, with Power Pages, etc. That won't be part of today's presentation, obviously, but just a nice to know. And I am going to be speaking about Power Automate and Power BI at Summit later this year. Well, I should say like in a month. So stay tuned for that. All right. Now, Power Automate does not require you to be a programmer. The way you make your flows is usually through the interface, the visually, if you will, by filling in the blanks on different cards and things like that. It is a flow engine, which basically means it goes through a series of steps or processes, just like a flow diagram, if you ever seen one of those. The engine itself is made up of many, 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 many tiny little connectors that you can use to talk to or listen to different apps or software, such as LinkedIn, Business Central, SharePoint, Trello, whatever the case may be. which means that you're not just stuck to using this for BC and Microsoft, although the scope of today's presentation is largely BC focused. Okay, there are a variety of ways that Power Automate flows run. You can have it automated, so it'll automatically run when something happens and you specify what that something is. You can have be instant or on demand, which is, you click a button and trigger a flow, or you could have it scheduled to run, every 5 minutes, every day, every week, you know, whatever kind of cadence makes sense for the automation that you're trying to trigger. The easiest way to understand a Power Automate flow is that there's an if statement and there's a then. So it's kind of like an if then statement. So some examples of ifs would be like, here. So, a new record is created or an existing record is modified. Two of these, which are examples of automated flows, or every 10 minutes, which would be an example of a scheduled flow, or button is clicked, which is an example of an instant flow. So that's kind of the if, what makes it run, right? So something happens. And when that something happens, we then have an action or some kind of response, right? So if a new record is created, then you could send a Teams message, or every 10 minutes you could update a field, or all these kind of things can work in conjunction. So the then is the what we want our flow to actually do, right? Now, when it comes to business centrals, um, the ifs fall into some categories. So there's approvals. So these are the out of the box, let's call it um, triggers that are in Power Automate for Business Central. So it could be when a purchase document approval is requested, when it comes to approvals, or when a journal entry is batch approvals requested, things like that. And we'll go through one of those as well, but that would be one of the types of triggers. The other kind of trigger would be like a business event. So this would be, if a customer is blocked or a purchase receipt's posted or, you know, I don't know, something's released and we'll be using the release, a purchase order is released. We'll be using release in one of our examples today. One thing to note though is that we can actually surface these, like you can actually customize this. So if you have a business event that's not in the list, we can add it to the list. There's also standard record triggers. So this is across the board. So as long as the entity that you're trying to listen to is surfaced, you could have it so that when something's changed or created or modified or deleted, and then this could be the if statement, if you create a new customer, if you modify the vendor bank account, for example, stuff like that, right? Then the thens, the actions that you can run are things like creating records, deleting records, finding records, all these kind of things. So these are what you can do to perform what are called CRUD operations, right? As well as getting and finding different records that are related to each other. And you'll use those typically when you're trying to look up something about the record that's been, let's say, modified or submitted for approval, things like that. All right, that was my PowerPoint piece. But let's start out with a very basic kind of and most common type of business flow, which is approvals. So what we'll do is we'll actually do a purchase order approval. And so I'm in Business Central, and the idea is that I want to have it so that when a purchase order is released, the admin has to approve it before it lets it happen, right? So if you've used typical workflows in Business Central, you go through the workflow module, let's call it, section of Business Central to create that. But when it comes to Power Automate, we can actually just go ahead and create that ourselves. Now, let me show you what that looks like. And for some reason, I can't find my windows. There we go. So yeah, because I'm going to be doing person submitting and person approving. I'm going to have two different browser sessions, if you will, open. But let's go ahead and create a new flow. So this is what Power Automate looks like when you log in. You'll have your home screen, you'll have templates and all this stuff. I'm just going to go ahead to the template section, and I'm going to search for Business Central. This would be where you could see all like the templates. So these are canned versions of Power Automate that have been already pretty much built for you. So, you can read through this list at your leisure, but what we're going to do is look for purchase order, request approval for business first order. Yeah, let's do that. So the first response, you could do like everyone needs to approve or the first person needs to approve. I'm just going to go to the first person needs to approve. And once you click on the template, it'll tell you all the different connectors that it needs for connecting. So Business Central, obviously, it needs to be able to access Business Central. It just needs for the approvals piece of it, and you'll see what that engine looks like. It's pretty cool. That needs a connection. Outlook because they're probably going to send an email, and users to look up things like names. So this just shows you what connectors. Remember, I was talking about all those little itty bitty pieces that make up Power Automate. These are all the things that need credentials, right? They need to be signed in and licensed, right? So if I go ahead and connect, the template's going to prompt me for what my environment is. This is my production environment. And the company I'm going to create this in is my Groovy Cakes company. So the email title, uh, let's just say purchase order approval required, something like that. Let's go ahead and create. Okay. And I'm going to click on edit just to show you what it looks like. So when we click on edit, you can see all these steps. Remember I was talking about how it's like more of a visual type of workflow builder. So you can come down here and you can see this one's going to go and get my direct approver. So that's this first response is going to direct approver. So let me log in here and let me just check under user. I think it's called approval user setup actually. And yeah, so I'm going to switch over to my Ramin user ID and my direct approver's name is admin, which is the user I'm logged in right now. So this is already turned on. I can see here it says now it's asking me if I want to turn it off. And down here in this history, you'll see all the different times it ran. So if you want to, for audit purposes, look back, you can use this as that, as that kind of function. So I'm going to move this to the side. We're going to hop back into here, and here I'm logged in as my Ramin user. And let's go ahead and release this purchase order. And you can see it says can only release when approval process completed. Oh, okay. Well, what I can do is then request approval. So I click on send approval request and you can see the status immediately flips to pending approval, right? So at this point, I can switch back to my other user who's the direct approver here. And it sometimes takes a minute. So um, particularly when I'm using the Outlook in the web kind of app, if you will. But what's going to happen is that the workflow is going to run. And you can see here in the history of this workflow that we just created, the 24 seconds ago, it was triggered. And now it says it's running. And the reason why it's saying it's running is like it's going to wait for the approval response. So if I come back to my Outlook here, it is unusually slow today. I should be getting an email and that will probably come through. Oh, there we go. So you sure took your time, didn't you? But yeah, so the email is kind of neat because the email has buttons in it, which isn't typical of emails because this is a kind of bespoke, Microsoft powered approval add-in, if you will. It's already kind of embedded into Outlook. So you can see here I have some options to approve or reject, and this is in Outlook. However, in Power Automate as well, I can go to the approval section and find it there, or in Microsoft Teams on the approvals on the left here. Let's just go back here. You can see here it says purchase order approval required, and it gives me some information, the PO number, the total, who the vendor is. And if I click this little thing, it'll take me straight to that purchase order, right? And from here, I could either do it here, add my comments, approve and reject, or I could do it within Outlook and just say approve, and I'll say, looks good. I go and click submit, and then now it tells me the action's completed, and it gives me kind of the history here. And so what'll happen is that when I come back in anywhere else, you'll see that it's already been approved. So it won't let me double approve, for example. Anyway, let's flip back to Business Central. And let's go back to our purchase orders, and you can see that it's released now. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of using a template to build a workflow, right? So really easy to set up a workflow approval. Now I use the the direct um, the direct approver method here, but you can also have it just go to specific email addresses within your tenant to approve. So it doesn't need to flow through that approval user setup. You could specify exactly how you want it to flow. So, if I come back to my workflow here, you can see where it says start and wait for an approval, it's passing who it's assigned to. And that's coming from the direct approver, right? So this step here called direct approver is going to get the direct approver for whoever requested it. So my email address being passed through to get the direct approver, and then it's going to pass it here. But I could very much put logic in here to add a condition. I could say like if the amount is less than or greater than something, um, I could have it go down one path and then have this approver be a different approver's email address, for example. And if it's greater than, it could go down another path and so on and so forth. So you can get really in the weeds of it when it comes to setting these up. But yeah, so that would be an example of using a template to set up a workflow. So it's a little bit less impressive because, you know, um, workflows are pretty straightforward and they already kind of exist out of the box anyway, but still pretty neat because you're also getting it in places like Teams and Outlook, and you have this really cool way to approve it without having the approver log into Business Central, for example, um, to see the document and click approve, right? So some pretty neat things there. And now let's do notifications. So with this, we're gonna get a little bit crazier. We're gonna build one from scratch, which is always a fun thing to do on a live webinar to try to create something from scratch and pray that it works like it's supposed to. But we'll start with a non-controversial topic to build notifications around, like tariffs. How about that? So let's say you want to, you say your purchaser wants to get notified anytime, an item that's subject to a tariff is being purchased from a non-US vendor, right? So maybe the business case for that would be you want to see if there's an alternate supplier that's local. So to facilitate that, initially what I did is some setup here. So on my items, I went ahead and I added in tariff numbers to the items, well, at least the relevant items for the purpose of this demo. And then I also set up two separate vendors, a Canadian vendor, our good friends, Canuck Restaurant Goods, and our American vendor, the Saucy American Supplies, right? So let's go ahead and build this workflow out, shall we? So what we'll do first is, remember when I was saying like you can specify what you want your trigger to be. Let's go back to my flows. Let's create a new flow, and this is going to be an automated cloud flow. So remember we're talking about there's different kinds, there's scheduled and on demand or instant. This one's going to be automatic because we want Microsoft Power Automate to automatically pick up on when a purchase order is released to then check if that vendor, you know, is a foreign vendor, and if so, then look at the lines of the purchase order or and then see if um, any of the items have tariff numbers on them. So let's give this a name. Let's call this tariff notification. So what are the triggers we want um, to use? So we are going to be looking at when it's released. So let's go with Business Central as my search. And I never understood why you type Business Central and like OneNote comes up first, but let's go here to Business Event. When a business event occurs in Business Central, when you first kind of create it, it's going to probably give you like a little invalid parameters, but it's going to be a little card with a whole bunch of blank space. So the reason that it's unhappy is because I haven't told it yet which environment and which company and which event that I want for this to trigger. So I go to my production environment. Now the event, remember, there's that list of out-of-the-box events. You'll notice the publisher name is between parentheses, and that's because you could have a custom one that Novia built where it'd be a customer blocked Novia, and that would be a different kind of trigger. For example, maybe you want only specific customers to fire off, for example. So anyway, what we're looking at here is the release of a purchase order, and I'm specifically going to set this up for my Groovy Cakes company. What I like to do is because these are so generic when you first set them up that they're not very descriptive, the titles. So it says when a business event occurs. I like to go ahead and say when PO is released, something like that. Just something where it becomes more readable, right? Okay, so when the PO is released, what do we want to do? Because this step does not actually give me details about the PO, all it does is tell me details about the event. I need to now get the PO. Let me get all the details of the PO. So I'm adding an action. I'm going to look for get record and the environment. Give me my production. It's going to be Groovy Cakes. Now there's ways you can make these two variables pull from this top one and kind of keep going down so you don't have to keep specifying it. But I'm not going to go over that right now. Let's just start with the basics and then we can always scale up, right? So when the purchase order is released, right? So I want to grab now the details of the purchase order. So I'll go and get the purchase orders, but I need to tell it which purchase order. So at this point, I need to give it an ID. Off the top of my head, I don't know, it's dynamic. But this step up here, when PO is released, will have that ID. So if I click this little dynamic content or like lightning bolt symbol, it's going to tell me all the fields that in steps above can be used as a variable. So I'm going to tell it, give me the purchase order ID from this step, right? And now I'm going to rename this as get purchase order, details, let's say, right? Okay, so I have the event that triggers. It's going to get the purchase order. Now I want to put some logic in there to say like, okay, if it's a foreign vendor, right? So there's this section called controls. These are built-in tools for Power Automate. Click on that. You can see there's a bunch of different controls, but we want a condition, basically an if statement. And you see, as soon as I select that, there's a true and a false path, right? So I could have completely different logic here and completely different logic here. In my case, I don't need it to do anything if it's not a foreign vendor. So I'm just going to be focusing on the true kind of side of things. So this condition is going to be check if vendor is foreign, let's say. And so now I have to give it my conditions here, right? So from the get purchase order details step, I have all the fields that API endpoint is producing. So I'm going to look at the buy from country region code. So if it's foreign, then it would be not blank, and it would not be US or USA, right? So let's go ahead here. My country region does not start with US because some people might enter the vendor with US, some people might USA, some people might leave it blank because blank means the local country. So this should catch all those type of scenarios. Perfect. I'll do a quick save just for good measure, kind of the paranoia in me. Um, okay, if the vendor is foreign, then what do we want to do? Well, we need to get the PO lines, right? So coming back here to my add action, sorry, I just sip my tea just to keep my voice from falling apart. I'm going to go ahead and find records because now I want to look at the lines. So I'm going to say find purchase order lines. And again, this is going to be a long song and dance, but I'm going to do the environment and the company. And this is where things get a little spicy because the item tariff number isn't part of the default purchase order lines endpoint, I went ahead and I created my own Innovia endpoint, and I just pulled it. I created my own purchase order lines API, right? And I need to now tell it specifically because this doesn't tell Power Automate which purchase order lines to get. If I just ran it as is, it'll look for all of them, right? So I'm going to pass in a query that looks something like document number is equal to, this is OData filtering. This is all, you know, documented online, but I can share some information with that about that later. So from the purchase order details, I want the number field, right? Because that's the document number. So the purchase order lines where the document number is equal to the purchase order up here. Make sense so far? Um, okay, so now that we're finding the lines, we now need another condition. Okay, I only want to notify the purchaser if the line is using an item that has a tariff number. So let's go ahead and add another condition in here. So check if line has tariff number. Code. Code makes more sense. Tariff code, right? So let's go ahead and explore. So this find purchase order lines endpoint that I surfaced has all these fields. And wouldn't you know it, I added tariff number in there. So if tariff number is not equal to blank, right? Then what do I want to do? If it has a tariff code, I then want to send an email. So under the true, I'm going to add an action here. Send email. Send an email. And who should I send an email to? I'll send it to, I could do either really. I'll just do my Ramin account. Subject could be tariff item on PO number. And then let's pull in the document number. And then in the email, I'm going to say an item subject to tariffs has been released on a, or has been included on a released purchase order. I don't know, something like that. And then I can say item number. And for that, I'm just going to pull in the number field of there. And then the quantity. Oh, actually, I'll pull in the description too. Just so, because for my user, it should be easier for them to understand. Description. Oh, that's the purchase order. Purchase order lines, so it's good description. The quantity, let's go ahead and pull in our quantity. Oh, that's again the purchase order details. Sorry, my bad. Again, my brain is a little mush. I'm fighting a cold here, but okay, so I have my quantity there. And then I want to be extra fancy. I want it not only to give them this information, but I want them to be able to click a button and look up the HTS code, um, online. So they could, with a click of a button, be able to look up that tariff code online. So I'm gonna write something like click here to see tariff, for example. And I'm gonna make this a hyperlink. I'm gonna edit this hyperlink, and this is the government site. Now you'll notice I'm gonna leave the end of this blank because I'm gonna put dynamic content in there. So right now it'll take us to this site, but this site isn't going to actually take me to specifically this item's tariff code. So if I go to the HTML view, right after the equal, I'm going to throw in that tariff number. All right. Okay, now there's some wonky stuff going on. It doesn't always do this, but sometimes it does. There's loops within loops within loops. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to clean this up a bit for myself because I don't like redundant loops. Okay, perfect. All right. So then I'm going to have this, and then still say notify purchaser by email. That's what I'll call this step, right? Again, I'm just finicky like that. I like having these be descriptive. So I'm going to save this, and then I can click the test button to test it out, or I could just turn on the, oh, it's already on. Good. All right. So now let's go ahead and so this was okay. So this is the email from the purchase order approval. So now let's go into the purchase orders. So here I am. This is the Canuck Restaurant Goods vendor. So it's Canadian vendor. So this one's country code is CA. Blah blah blah. This item here is one of the ones that have tariff codes on it. So let's go ahead and release this. So this is released. I mean, for good measure, I could also release the American one, and that shouldn't fire. But this one will fire. This one won't. So now, boom. Okay, so I got an email telling me a tariffed item has been included on a released purchase order. And it tells me the item number, item name, the quantity, and I can click here to see the details of the tariff. And it takes me right there. I don't know how to read this. Is it 6.4% or 35%? Maybe that's different. Maybe maybe this is like for China or other ones that have like higher tariff rates. I don't quite know. Either way, I could take a look at this as a purchaser and be like, yo, that's going to eat into our margin. Um, let's um, let's see if we can source this locally, for example, right? So something as simple as that, right, could be one of the ways that you could utilize our automate for notifying folks of things that happen in Business Central. Hopefully, I haven't lost you and I'm coherent. I can't quite tell if I'm speaking English at this point. Um, but yeah, so that's the notifications. The next thing we want to take a look at is integrations. So an often neglected potential use of Power Automate is for integrations. In other words, to make other systems talk to Business Central or vice versa, and either receive or send data to and from each other. A lot of people think of integration as this huge project that requires a lot of middleware, but it could be as simple as a Power Automate flow. For this one, I've kind of pre-baked um, a flow here, and I just want to demonstrate it first, and then we'll talk about the mechanics of it. So if I look at my employee list, I have 4 employees that I already have in Business Central. I'm going to go to my HR site, my onboarding site. And this is the site where, maybe internally we use to onboard folks. You can keep them up to date on events, give them all their like handbooks and all this kind of resources and documentation. But maybe part of my step is to go through an onboarding form. So here, this is a Microsoft form. I'm going to type a name. Um, let's say Harry Potter. And his email address is hpotter@wizardry.net. 555 999 whatever the case may be. And oh my God, I should know the address and I don't. But that's fine. Let's just do um let's just do stuff. It's been a minute since I've been up to speed on Harry Potter stuff. Well, okay, so their employment date, they start next week, let's say. And here's a vital little thing. One of the questions in my form here is, should I create this in Business Central or not? And this is where I'm going to say yes. And then has the employee signed the loss of limbs waiver? I'm going to say yes. And let's go ahead and submit. Okay, nothing up my sleeve. I submitted that through just the Microsoft form. I come in here, let's leave the page and come back. And wouldn't you know it, Harry Potter was created as an employee in Business Central. Now, how did that how did that happen? So this is my Power Automate flow. It's actually really simple. Very, very simple. When a new response is submitted using the Microsoft Forms um, action, again, usually you'll see these 2 steps be very common no matter what your data source is, because this is just a trigger. At this point, we're going to get the details of that response, right? So the response ID from this trigger is what we're going to look up from this form. And the condition is going to be this is not very readable, but this is going to be if create in Business Central is equal to yes. Remember that question in the form. Then very simple kind of create record function in Power Automate. Again, I pointed to my environment, and this is just a base table. And I cherry pick pieces from this response detail. The first name goes into the given name field, middle name goes to middle, surname goes to surname, et cetera, right? So then you could do all your mapping here to say like which fields from the form, which fields in Business Central, this table. And then it just go ahead and creates it, which it did here. Pretty nifty. Um, so that's kind of one example of how you could use it for simple integration. So you can imagine this was a Microsoft form. Like this you could connect this to a SharePoint list, a Dataverse table, maybe use CRM. And so the Dataverse connection there would be really cool. Like you could have it, you know, move data back and forth. Um, you could use it for external systems, even Excel spreadsheets. I don't recommend. A lot of folks are into smart sheets these days, so maybe a smart sheet row or something when it's added should do something in Business Central. I actually had someone reach out to me recently asking about can they can they use Smartsheet as their basically PM tool and then have it tie into the projects module, right? What used to be called jobs. And so they want it such that, once it goes through the stage in Smartsheets where it becomes like it's past the bidding process and it's kind of validated, that it then gets pushed back to BC as a project when when it hits that status, for example. Anyway, a lot of different ways you could probably think about how you could use it. But the last example I want to go through is around scheduling and planning. So this is something as well that folks will oftentimes want follow-ups or things like that. So sometimes you just want to create like a task or like a follow-up or schedule a calendar event or something based on something that happens in BC. Uh, for this example, I'm going to use the idea of, you have a new item that maybe you just added to your system, and you want to create a follow-up task for your sales team to check in with the client after a week, like a week after they're supposed to receive it, right? Just to say, hey, how do you like this product? It's new. We just want to kind of get your feedback to see if it's good or we need to go back for any quality control issues, stuff like that, right? So the the way I kind of built that out, let me first show you the the demo piece. So we're going to go to sales. Actually, I'll go to items first. So this item here, Innovium, this is a new item. And the way that you can kind of prove it is, well, I just created it like yesterday, last night, in fact. Yeah. So it's pretty new, hot off the presses, brand new item. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to my sales orders. Um, Here I have a sales order to Han Solo, and this is the Innovium sauce that I'm adding to this order. Put in my price and all that kind of good stuff. And you can see here that the planned delivery date is the 14th, right? So if the idea, and this is kind of weird, that my shipment day is 14th and delivery, that's like same day delivery. This is like Amazon level fulfillment. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's post the shipment. I don't even need to invoice it. Let's just ship it. Oh, I guess I should probably put in a quantity to ship here. Let's just fully fulfill this. Excellent. All right. Go back here. Oh, this is my wrong teams. This is my right teams. Okay. So it might take a minute, but in my new item shipment workflow, I just have to wait forever, seemingly. Okay, maybe while we're waiting on that, I'm going to go through the actual flow itself and show you how it was built. Okay, 9 seconds ago. There we go. It does take a minute, which is kind of anticlimactic for these demos. But so let me first off show you. I've added a Microsoft To Do. Did I? I did. Yeah, look at that. So you can see this one was just created. It's due. It runs on September 21st. So exactly 1 week after that 14th um, delivery date. It says follow up with Han Solo and customer number on experience with item 105 Inobi Yum Sauce, right? On top of that, it added a card in Teams to the product development team in this channel called New Product Sales. And it says a new item is just sold. Inobi Yum Sauce has just had a sale of 10 units to Han Solo. This might be the next bestseller, right? So this is automatically run. And the way the flow works is this one is also not super complex, but so when a record's created and that record is a sales shipment line, because you can't manually create those always go through posting a shipment. Then it gets the shipment lines and it's gonna look up the item number and the condition. I created this field called days since created is less than or equal to 7. So basically, I put in a parameter here for it to be like within a week. Like if it was just created a week ago, this item. If true, then post a message in a chat or channel. So I pointed to the new product sales teams channel, this thing here, and I've passed in all the variables of item name, item number, quantity, customer name, right? And then also I told it to create a to do, right? So this is Microsoft Tasks or to do. And I just tell it to new product follow up. I give it a follow up date and I say follow up with, I put all the details there. So pretty simple but powerful stuff there. And then actually that's it pretty much. So all this automation gets a stamp of approval from the wizarding community. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Ramin. Yes, we do have a couple questions that came through.
Yeah.
The first one is, will Microsoft replace standard workflow functionality with Power Automate?
I mean, as much as I like to say I'm a sorcerer and a wizard, I don't have that kind of crystal ball, but they have many a time kind of communicated, particularly more in the past year or so, that that is the plan. They eventually want to move it, like deprecate workflows and kind of push everything to Power Automate. Now, I don't personally foresee it happening in the next release, maybe not even the next 2 or 3 releases, but it definitely they've signaled, and if signaling is anything to go off of, they've signaled that that's what they would like. Because they don't want to have to maintain a workflow engine in here when they already have a cloud workflow engine in Power Automate, right? So that's kind of they've been slowly inching towards this by virtue of even having those events and triggers and all that kind of stuff in the first place in Power Automate is kind of a good indicator that that's kind of where they're investing and their focus into, right? Sorry, I don't know if that helped or I'm just commentating at this point. I don't actually know, but that's what they've indicated. And some of the folks, including AJ Ansari that we've spoken to, he seems to indicate that he has it on the inside track that that's the plan. When it is, your guess is as good as mine, but that is the direction. So the sooner you learn this stuff, the better off you are for future proofing yourself, I guess.
Okay, great. And then is it possible, or how is it possible to see history of the Power Automate history that's older than 28 days?
Oh, now that's interesting. I don't know if you can. That's such an interesting question that I've never heard anyone ask before, so kudos. Um, I will have to look into that. I honestly don't know. I don't, No, if they retain that details after automate runs uh, beyond 28 days. I'm literally Googling it. I guess Binging it because Edge default to Bing. Yeah, it means if it's not longer this period. Okay. Yeah. It's limited to 28 days due to GDPR. Okay. So having said that, what I might recommend then is you could do this a few ways, right? I'm assuming this is more for approvals than anything else, right? That you're kind of looking at that. You want that history of approvals, right? So one way to do it is to like add a step at the end of this area flow to basically log and just have it stored somewhere. But what I've personally done, and this is what I was kind of alluding to before, where that Microsoft still has a bunch of work to do before we can before I would say that they're in a position where they can retire workflows and move to um, Power Automate, is that in the approval entries table, which if you use approvals, you'd know that this is where you'd house all your history of your approvals for the base workflow, right? And you'll see here it did nothing. It does not log in here at all. So I think this is an area that they'll have to start populating with webhook approvals as well. Um, so yeah, anyway, sorry, I don't know if that helps you with kind of like show it. Like basically 28 days is the cap, but there are workarounds that you can do to get it in there. And I do have one client. I can't log into their rights, yeah, due to privacy. But they are in the same boat that they wanted it to be housed in BC to be able to see that history. They don't want to have to go to Power Automate. So we actually did put a custom mod in there to populate certain fields and have that flow down. They actually want it down to the GL. I do not recommend that personally, but they were adamant. So, but anyway, but on the general ledger entries, they'll be able to actually see approver ID and the date time it was approved. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. Does that kind of make sense?
Hopefully, the person who asked that, if you can put a response back either in the chat or if you'd like us to look more into that, or maybe do a separate call to help with anything, we
Yeah,
could
and
possibly.
there's other blog posts out there too. Like this, like from a few years back. Clearly, you're not the first person to think about this limitation. You tell you have a compliance mind. So this person, I guess, is recommending that you export. Oh, there's a Microsoft ID on here too. Nice. So maybe we want to vote for that. But it looks like this person's recommending to actually go in and export the CSV ever so often. That sounds painful. So I wouldn't do. I would much rather just have it automatically put to a log, a SharePoint list or something, than have to manually come in and download CSV files and version them and all that kind of jazz. But anyway,
Okay, and then we have one more question that came through.
go for it.
Do approvers need to have a Business Central user license?
Okay. So that's an interesting one. I guess technically, technically speaking, I don't think so because you can see here the step where it actually approves the request doesn't use like it's not a per person connection. It's connected to whoever kind of authored this flow, or maybe not even authored this flow, whatever you specify in your connection settings on this flow. So I don't technically think they do, but they do need to be part of your tenant, if that makes sense. Like they do need to be on your domain. Do you know what I mean? Like they have to be at your like at innovate.com or whatever. Like this is one of the weird things. You can't have like an external user unless you invite them as a guest in Entra/Azure, um, and then do it that way. But yeah, but I guess sorry to go back. to the actual question, I don't actually think so. Just based on the way that the flow works, is that it will use the connection credentials to trigger the approve response or action, let's call it, back to BC, right? I feel like I might get in trouble for saying this, but
I did put in the chat if anybody has any further questions or if those answers didn't help answer your question exactly, we could possibly reach out and have a further discussion if you'd like. So, all right. Well, that was a great presentation, Ramin. Thank you very much.
yeah, no problem. And again, Inovia, we're not going anywhere. So obviously take the time to digest this information, play around with it, and reach out if you just want to get started and you need some assistance there. Although, as you saw, it's not overly complicated. So I feel like it's something you could probably like muddle your way through with like testing in a sandbox first. But I strongly recommend everyone here just go play with Power Automate. It's fun. It's actually legitimately fun when it works. And I know I make the joke that it's magic, but it feels like it sometimes when you get a flow that just like is executed perfectly and just meets this gap that you have in your business. Oh man, nothing like it. Nothing like it. I'll get off my soapbox. Anyway,
Right. Thank you, Ramin. Uh, please go ahead and visit our website at innovia.com/resources for further information. We have a bunch of different information on there for you to explore. So check that resources page out. And like I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded and everyone will get a copy of it emailed to you. So look for that in your inbox soon, later this week. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you at a future webinar or event. Have a great day.